The galaxy was never quiet. For 10,000 years there had always been noise. Ships moving between stars, traders calling on open channels, war fleets sending warnings, diplomats arguing on long-distance signals. The galaxy was always full of sound, but 3 days ago everything stopped. Not slowly, not one by one, it stopped all at once. Like someone had reached out and pressed a button and turned everything off. Commander Wren was sitting in a broken chair when it happened. He was on what was left of Space Station Orion 7, a human station that had been damaged in a battle 4 years ago and never fully repaired. The walls had cracks in them. One of the windows had a long scratch across it from an old weapon hit. The lights flickered sometimes, but Wren liked it here. It was quiet, and quiet was rare in this part of the galaxy. He was drinking cold coffee and reading an old report when his screen went bright. Every screen on the station lit up at the same time. Wren put down his cup slowly. He stood up and walked to the main screen. His boots made a soft sound on the metal floor. He looked at the numbers and words running across the display. His face did not change, but his eyes moved fast, reading everything. The signal had come from Earth, one single transmission, sent to every receiving station in the known galaxy. It had reached places no human ship had ever traveled. It had passed through alien systems that humans were not even allowed to enter, and it had reached every screen, every receiver, every listening post in the galaxy at exactly the same moment. Wren read the first line of the report. Then he read it again. He sat down slowly in his chair, and he laughed. 3 days earlier, the Galactic Council had been meeting on Throne Station, a massive structure built by the Veth, the oldest and most powerful alien civilization in the galaxy. The Veth were tall, blue-skinned, and very old. Their civilization was 9,000 years ahead of Earth. They had ships that could cross entire star systems in hours. They had weapons that could destroy a moon. They had technology that humans had not even imagined yet. And they did not think much of humans. At the council table that day there were 12 alien species. The Veth sat at the head as always. Beside them sat the Kraul, 6 armed traders who controlled most of the galaxy's supply routes. Next to the Kraul sat the Dranasi, scientists who had mapped over 40,000 planets. Then came the Solvan, the Marathi, the Enoch, the Tarfen, and 5 others, each powerful, each ancient, each very sure of their own importance. And at the very far end of the table, almost at the door, sat the 2 human representatives. Their names were Ambassador Yara and her assistant, a young man named Cole. They had traveled for 3 months to reach this meeting. They had asked 6 times for a better seat at the table. They had been ignored 6 times. Yara sat with a straight back and a calm face. She had been an ambassador for 20 years. She was used to being ignored, but she had also learned something important over those 20 years. The moment you stop watching the quiet ones is the moment they surprise you. Today's meeting was about trade routes near the outer belt. The Kraul wanted more control. The Veth wanted to tax new ship paths. The Dranasi wanted to study a new gas cloud near one of the contested zones. No one asked the humans anything. Cole leaned over and whispered to Yara, "Should we say something?" Yara did not look at him. "No," she said quietly. "Just watch." Cole frowned. He was new. He did not understand yet. The meeting went on for 4 hours. Voices rose, numbers were argued. 2 of the Solvan delegates left the room for a private conversation and came back looking satisfied. The Marathi proposed something that no one agreed to. A vote was called. Earth was not part of the vote. At the end of the meeting, the Veth Council leader, a tall old alien named Sovereign Dreth, looked at the human end of the table for the first time. "Humans," he said in the standard galactic language, "you may observe the new route maps when they are made available to lower civilizations." Cole felt heat rise in his face. Yara simply nodded. "Thank you, Sovereign." They left the room. Cole was angry. Yara was not. "Lower civilizations," Cole muttered as they walked down the corridor. "We've been traveling space for 300 years. We've built stations on 40 planets. "I know," Yara said. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Yara stopped walking. She turned and looked at the young man. Her eyes were calm, very calm. Because, she said, they are not ready to hear us yet. Cole did not understand what she meant. He would in 3 days. The silence started on a Tuesday. Station monitors across the galaxy noticed it first. The long-range receivers that usually picked up thousands of signals every hour suddenly went quiet. Ship-to-ship communications dropped to zero. Beacon signals from the Veth home system, which had been broadcasting continuously for 3,000 years, stopped. Just stopped. Emergency alerts went out to every major station. Scientists ran diagnostics, checking their equipment, checking their receivers, checking the signal relays between star systems. Everything was working perfectly. The galaxy had simply gone quiet. At first, people thought it was a technical error. Then they thought it was some kind of natural event. A wave from a dying star, a gravitational effect, something that science could explain. But the hours passed, and the silence continued. On Throne Station, the Galactic Council met again, but this time the mood was different. The Veth were standing instead of sitting, which no one had seen before. The Crowl were talking in low, fast voices. The Drenasi had their analysis machines running at full power and were getting no answers. Sovereign Dreth stood at the head of the room and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Find the source." Every team, every ship, every scanner in the galaxy turned on at once. And 2 days later, they found it. The silence had started from Earth, back on Orion 7. Commander Wren was now reading the full report for the 5th time. He had not slept. He had a team of 12 people on the station with him. 7 of them were engineers, 3 were scientists, 1 was a medical officer, and 1 was a young soldier named Private Danny, who was 17 years old and had been assigned to the station only 2 months ago. Danny knocked on Wren's door. "Commander, it's been a long time since you came out. Are you okay?" "Come in," Wren said. Danny stepped inside. She was small with short dark hair and careful eyes. She looked at the screens covering every wall of Wren's office, all of them showing the same thing. The galaxy's silence reports, the alien emergency broadcasts, the deep space scanner readings. "What's happening?" she asked. Wren looked at her. He thought for a moment. Then he pulled up a star map on the main screen. He pointed to a large blue mark near the center of the galaxy. "You know who the Veth are?" "Yes, sir. Oldest civilization, most powerful." "And the Crowl?" "Trade empire. They control half the supply routes. The Drenasi, the Solvan, the Mirathi." Danny nodded at each name. Wren looked at the map. 3 days ago, all of them went silent. Not just quiet, silent. Their ships stopped broadcasting. Their home stations stopped sending signals. It is as if they are still there, but they are no longer communicating. Danny stared at the map. What happened to them? Wren was quiet for a moment. "Earth sent them a message." Danny blinked. "Earth? Our Earth?" "Yes." "What did the message say?" Wren turned away from the screen. He walked to the small window of his office, the one with the long scratch across the glass. He looked out at the stars. They looked exactly the same as always, cold and distant and indifferent. "I'll tell you," he said quietly. "But first I need you to understand something. Something that most people in this galaxy have never understood about humans." Danny waited. Wren put his hand against the scratched glass. "Every species in this galaxy looked at us and saw weakness," he said. "They saw a small planet. They saw slow ships. They saw short lives. They saw technology that was behind theirs by hundreds or thousands of years. They saw arguments between countries, wars between ourselves. They saw humans who couldn't even agree with each other." He paused. "And they decided we were not important." Danny said nothing. She was listening carefully. "The Veth called us a lower civilization officially in front of every council in the galaxy. The Crowl refused to give us fair trade deals for 60 years. The Drenasi studied our planet without asking our permission. The Solvan used our outer belt territories as a testing ground for their weapons because they said humans were too weak to complain." His voice was not angry. It was quiet. Very quiet. "And we never complained," he said. "We never raised our voice. We never fired a single shot at any of them. We never sent a war fleet. We never even asked for an apology. Danny frowned. Why not? Ren turned from the window and looked at her. Because we were busy. On Earth, in a place that no map in the galaxy showed, deep under a mountain range in the southern hemisphere, there was a room, not a small room, a room the size of a city. It had been built over 150 years. Construction started quietly. In the early days when humans first made contact with alien civilizations and realized, very quickly, that the galaxy was not a safe or friendly place, the builders of that room had a simple idea. They could not compete with the Veth in ship technology, not for centuries. They could not match the Crowl in numbers. They could not match the Drenasi in science, not yet. But humans had one thing that no other species in the galaxy had ever developed, not because they weren't smart enough, but because they had never needed it. Humans had patience born from pain. Every other civilization that reached the stars had done so in a time of peace and growth. They expanded outward when things were good, when they were strong, when they had resources and safety. Humans reached the stars while still healing from centuries of war with each other. Centuries of disease, of loss, of rebuilding, of starting again and again and again. They knew how to wait. They knew how to endure. They knew how to build something slowly, carefully, quietly, over a very long time, without telling anyone. And that is exactly what they did. The room under the mountain had a name, Project Silence, and 3 days ago it had been activated for the first time. Danny was sitting down now on the floor of Ren's office, her back against the wall, her eyes wide. She had been listening for a long time. So the machine, she said slowly. It didn't destroy them? No, Ren said. It didn't kill anyone? No. Then what did it do? Ren sat down across from her. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. It silenced them, he said. Every ship, every station, every receiver, every long-range broadcaster belonging to the species that had mistreated Earth. It cut their signals. It blocked their communications. It isolated them from each other and from the galaxy, completely. Like putting them in a box. Exactly like that. Danny was quiet. Then she said, They must be terrified. Yes, Ren said. They are. Danny looked at the screens around her, at the silence reports, at the alien emergency alerts that had been running for 3 days from the species that were not yet silenced, the smaller civilizations, the ones that had stayed neutral, the ones that had sometimes been kind to Earth. And the message, she said, the 7 words? Ren looked at her. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he stood up, walked to his desk, and turned the screen toward her. 7 words, Danny read them once, then she read them again. She looked up at Ren, her expression was impossible to read, something between shock and understanding. That's it? She whispered. That's it, Ren said. Danny looked back at the screen. The 7 words sat there, calm and simple on a black background. They were not a threat. They were not a demand. They were not an order or a warning or a battle cry. They were something far more powerful than any of those things. And in the silence of a galaxy that had forgotten to take humans seriously, those 7 words had done what 1,000 war fleets could never have done. They had made every powerful civilization in the known universe stop and listen and remember. For the first time, outside the scratched window of Orion 7, the stars were still cold and distant. But something had changed. For 300 years, humans had looked at those stars and been told they were not ready, not strong enough, not advanced enough, not worthy of a real seat at any table. For 300 years, they had watched and waited and built something no one knew about. And now the galaxy was quiet, not because it was empty, but because for the first time in 10,000 years it was listening. Commander Ren picked up his cold coffee, took a sip and looked at the stars. Private Danny sat on the floor of his office, staring at a screen with 7 words on it, her hands very still. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Danny said very quietly, "What happens now?" Ren thought about it. "Now?" he said. He set down his cup. "Now they come to us, The 7 words were still on the screen. Danny had not moved from the floor. She had read them maybe 20 times by now. Each time she read them, she felt something different. First, it was confusion, then surprise, then something she could not name, something that felt like pride but also like fear at the same time. Commander Wren was standing at the window again, looking at the stars. Neither of them had spoken in several minutes. Finally, Danny looked up from the screen and said, "How long were they planning this?" Wren did not turn around. 153 years, he said. Danny stared at his back. "That's before my grandmother was born." "Yes, before your grandmother was born too, yes." She looked at the screen again, at the 7 words, at the simple, calm, devastating 7 words that had silenced the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. "And nobody knew?" she asked. "Nobody outside Earth?" "Nobody," Wren said. "Not one alien, not one spy, not one scanner in the galaxy picked it up. For 153 years, Earth built something in complete silence and nobody noticed. Because nobody was watching us carefully enough." He finally turned from the window. His face was tired, but his eyes were sharp. "That," he said, "was the first part of the plan. 212 years ago, in the early days of human space travel, a small ship called the Horizon left Earth for the first time. It carried 6 people, 2 pilots, 2 scientists, 1 engineer, and 1 diplomat named Mara Solis. They traveled for 11 months and reached the edge of Veth space. They sent a greeting signal. It was friendly, careful, full of hope. Humans had spent decades writing that message, trying to make it perfect, trying to make it say, "We come in peace. We want to learn. We want to be friends." The Veth received the signal. They waited 4 days before responding. When they finally answered, the message was short. It said, "We have noted your existence. You are a young species. Your technology is primitive. Your civilization is unstable. You may observe from a distance. Do not enter Veth space without permission. Do not approach Veth ships. Do not attempt further contact unless invited." That was it. No hello, no welcome, no curiosity. Just a list of things humans were not allowed to do. Mara Solis sat in the small ship and read the message 3 times. Around her, the other 5 crew members were quiet. Some of them looked angry. One of the pilots had his jaw tight. The engineer was staring at the floor. Mara looked at all of them. Then she opened her personal log and wrote 1 sentence. She wrote, "They think we are nothing. Good. Let them keep thinking that." She closed the log. "Turn the ship around," she said quietly. "We're going home." "That's it?" the pilot asked. "We came all this way and we're just leaving?" "We're not just leaving," Mara said. "We're starting." Nobody understood what she meant. Not yet. When Mara Solis returned to Earth, she did not give interviews. She did not speak to the public. She went directly to a private meeting with the 12 people who led Earth's space program. She sat down and she told them exactly what she had seen and heard. Then she said, "We have 2 choices." The room was quiet. "We can spend the next 500 years trying to compete with them on their terms, building bigger ships, trying to match their technology, asking for respect and being ignored, pushing at their doors until they let us in." She paused. "Or we can do something they will never see coming." One of the council members leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" Mara put her hands flat on the table. "I am suggesting," she said, "that we stop trying to play their game and start building our own." The plan had a name before it had a shape. They called it Project Silence from the very beginning, because the most important part of the plan was not what they would build. It was how quietly they would build it. Every person brought into the project signed agreements so serious that breaking them meant permanent removal from all space programs, all positions, all futures in Earth's growing space ambitions. There were fewer than 200 people who knew the full picture at any one time. Most workers on the project knew only their small piece. They built what they were asked to build and did not ask questions about the rest. Construction started in the southern mountains, deep underground. So deep that even the most advanced alien scanners, the kind the Dranasi used to study planets from orbit, could not detect the energy signatures. The engineers designed everything to look like natural geological activity from above. Heat vents were built to mimic volcanic patterns. The power sources were shielded inside layers of a material that Earth scientists had developed specifically to absorb and scatter scanner signals. From space, the mountain range looked completely normal. For 153 years, on Throne Station, 3 days after the silence began, Sovereign Dreth was not sitting. He had not sat down in 2 days. He was standing in the center of the Veth Emergency Operations Room, surrounded by screens and analysts and engineers who were all telling him the same thing in different ways. They could not fix it. Their communications were cut. Their long-range signals were blocked. Their ships could still travel but could not talk to each other across distances. The entire network that held Veth civilization together, the web of signals and broadcasts and data streams that connected their homeworld to their colonies and stations and fleets, was silent, and they could not find the source. They could not find it because it was not a signal. It was not a weapon firing at them. It was not a virus in their systems. It was something else, something none of their scientists had any category for. One of the senior analysts, a young Veth named Asa, finally came to Dreth with a theory. "Sovereign," she said carefully, "there is only one transmission we have found that correlates with the start of the silence." Dreth looked at her. "What transmission?" Asa hesitated. "It came from Earth." The room went very quiet. Dreth stared at her for a long moment. "Earth," he repeated. "Yes, Sovereign. The humans. Yes." Dreth turned slowly and looked at the main screen, where a galaxy map showed the affected zones. Every civilization that had ever mistreated Earth was dark on that map. Silent, isolated. The civilizations that had been neutral or kind to humans, small planets, young species, a few trading outposts that had always dealt fairly with human ships. They were still lit up, still broadcasting, still connected. Dreth understood, in that moment, what he was looking at. He understood the pattern. He sat down, very slowly for the first time in 2 days. "Get me everything we have on Earth's underground construction activity," he said quietly. "Everything going back 200 years. Asa nodded and left quickly. Dreth sat alone in the middle of the busy room. For 9,000 years, the Veth had been the most powerful force in the galaxy. For 9,000 years, nothing had surprised them. He put his hands together and thought about a small blue planet that nobody had taken seriously. And for the first time in his very long life, Sovereign Dreth felt something unfamiliar. He felt afraid. Back on Orion 7, Commander Wren had called the whole team together. All 12 of them were in the main hall, sitting on crates and chairs on the floor. The engineers, the scientists, the medical officer, and Private Danny, who was still holding the tablet with the 7 words on it like she was not ready to put it down. Wren stood in front of them. "You've all seen the reports," he said. "You know what's happening in the galaxy right now. I'm not going to pretend this is a small thing. It is not a small thing." He looked around the room. "Earth activated Project Silence 3 days ago. Most of you have heard that name for the first time today. Some of you maybe heard rumors, but let me tell you what it actually is." He pulled up the galaxy map on the hall screen. The same dark areas, the same silent zones. "Project Silence is not a weapon in the way we normally think about weapons," he said. "It does not fire, it does not explode, it does not destroy. What it does is something much more precise." He pointed to the dark zones on the map. "It cuts signals, specifically. It cuts the communication signals of any civilization that Earth designates. It wraps around their broadcast frequencies and absorbs them, completely, perfectly, without leaving any trace that can be tracked or reversed. From the inside, it feels like the universe went silent. From the outside, it looks like they simply stopped talking." One of the engineers, a heavy-set man named Soros, raised his hand. "How does it reach that far? We're talking about civilizations on the other side of the galaxy." "Because it doesn't travel," Wren said. "It's already there." The relay network was built over 100 years. Tiny nodes, smaller than a coin, placed on thousands of asteroids and dead moons and uninhabited rock in every corner of explored space. No power signature, no broadcast signal. They sit dormant until activated. And when Earth sent the command 3 days ago, every single node activated at the same time. The room was silent. 100 years of placing those nodes, Wren said. Human ships traveling routes that nobody cared about, exploration missions to worthless rocks, scientific surveys of dead systems. Every single one of those missions placed nodes. Nobody was watching because nobody thought human ships were doing anything important. Danny spoke from her spot on the floor. They were hiding in plain sight. Yes, Ren said. Soro spoke again. And the affected civilizations, the Veth, the Kraul, all of them, they can't reverse it? They cannot reverse what they cannot find, Ren said. The nodes do not broadcast. They only receive the activation signal and then absorb outgoing transmissions. There is nothing to track, nothing to scan for, nothing to locate. Another engineer, a woman named Priya, was frowning. Why these specific civilizations? Why not all of them? Ren looked at her. Because Earth is not trying to take over the galaxy, he said. Earth is not trying to punish everyone. Earth is trying to correct a specific injustice. The civilizations that are silent right now are exactly the ones that spent 200 years treating humans as less than nothing. The ones that are still talking. The neutral planets, the young species, the fair traders. They are untouched. He let that sit for a moment. Earth chose very carefully, he said. That choice is part of the message. On the Kraul homeworld, panic had set in by the second day. The Kraul were traders above everything else. Their entire civilization ran on communication, on deals made across light years, on prices and routes and schedules coordinated between hundreds of systems. Without signals, without broadcasts, without the ability to talk to their own ships and stations. Their trade empire was falling apart in real time. Ships were arriving at stations with no instructions. Cargo was sitting undelivered. Pilots were making decisions alone with no guidance. Some routes had 3 ships trying to use the same path because nobody could coordinate. The Kraul Council met in chaos. Nobody had answers. One old council member, a female named Vesh who had been trading for 60 years, sat very still while everyone else shouted around her. She was thinking about something, a memory from many years ago. She remembered a human trader who had come to her station asking for a fair contract. He had good cargo, good prices, honest numbers. She had given him a contract that was, she now admitted to herself, completely unfair. She had charged him 3 times the standard fee because she could. Because he was human and humans had no choice but to accept bad deals or go home. He had signed the contract without complaint. He had said only one thing before leaving. He had said quietly in her language, which surprised her because humans rarely bothered to learn Kraul. Thank you. I will remember this. She had not thought about those words in 40 years. She thought about them now. The alien spy's name was Fen. He was Dranasi, a scientist who had been assigned to monitor human activity on their outer planets for the past decade. It was a boring job. Humans were not very interesting to monitor. They were slow and noisy and transparent in their activities. But 6 months ago, Fen had noticed something. A pattern in human ship movements, very slight, very easy to miss. Ships that were supposed to be on geological survey missions were taking routes that did not match the survey targets. They were stopping at locations that had no scientific value. Empty rocks, dead asteroids, useless space. Fen had filed a report. Nobody read it. He filed a second report with more data. It was marked as low priority and stored. He had spent 3 months trying to get someone at the Dranasi Science Council to take him seriously. Nobody did. 2 weeks ago, he had finally gotten a meeting with a senior officer. He had laid out all his data, all his observations, all his carefully built evidence of something strange happening in human space. The senior officer had looked at the data. Then he had looked at Fen. You are telling me, the officer said slowly, that you think humans are building some kind of secret network. Yes, Fen said. The officer had laughed, not a small laugh, a real laugh, long and genuine. Fen, he said, still smiling, humans can barely maintain their own stations, their ships are slow, their technology is 300 years behind ours. What could they possibly be hiding that we should worry about? Fen had left the meeting with his data and his ignored reports and his growing, uncomfortable feeling that everyone around him was making a very serious mistake. 2 weeks later, the silence began. Fen sat in his quarters on a Drenazi research station, surrounded by screens that showed nothing, and thought about how different things might have been if someone had simply listened. He tried to send a message to the Science Council. There was no signal. He was already inside the silence. Danny found Commander Wren alone again after the meeting. He was back at the window, as she was beginning to expect he always would be. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." She stood beside him and looked at the stars. "Did you know?" she asked. "Before 3 days ago, did you know about Project Silence?" Wren was quiet for a moment. "I knew something was coming," he said. "I didn't know what or when. I was given a sealed file 10 years ago when I took command of this station. I was told not to open it until I received a specific signal from Earth. 3 days ago I received that signal, and I opened the file. And what was in it?" "Everything," he said. "The full history of the project, the technical details, the plan for what comes next, and a letter." Danny looked at him. "A letter from who?" Wren was quiet again, longer this time. "From Mara Solis," he said. "Written before she died, 60 years ago. She wrote it for whoever would be standing in a place like this on a day like this. She wanted someone to understand why. Why they did it. Why they waited," he said. She wrote, "We did not wait because we were afraid. We waited because we wanted to be sure. We wanted a solution that would not start another war. We wanted something that would make them stop, without anyone dying, without a single shot fired, without making ourselves into the same thing they were." He looked at the stars. She said, "The hardest thing a people can do is hold their anger for 100 years and still come out on the other side choosing not to destroy." Danny was quiet. Outside, the stars were cold and still. "What happens now?" she asked. Wren had answered this question once already today, but this time he took longer. "Now the ones who are silenced realize that they cannot fix this alone," he said. "Now they start looking for someone to negotiate with. Now they start understanding that the only way out of the silence is through Earth." He turned from the window. "And now," he said, "for the first time in 200 years, they come to us as equals, not because they want to, but because they have no other choice." Danny nodded slowly. She looked at the tablet in her hand, the one with the 7 words still on the screen. She read them one more time. Then she finally, carefully, set the tablet down. On 100 planets, in 100 silent rooms, the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy were doing something they had never done before. They were preparing messages for Earth, not orders, not demands, not condescending instructions about what primitives were allowed to do. Requests, humble, careful, slightly desperate requests, and for the first time in 200 years, humans were going to decide whether or not to answer. The first message came from the Crowl. It arrived at Earth's main receiving station on a quiet morning. The operators on duty almost missed it because it came in on a frequency that humans had not used in 40 years. An old frequency, one that the Crowl themselves had assigned to human ships back when they first made contact, back when they wanted to make sure human signals stayed separate from the important ones. The message was short. It said, "We request communication with Earth representatives. We wish to discuss the current situation. We are prepared to negotiate." The operator who received it read it twice. Then she called her supervisor. Her supervisor read it, then called his supervisor. Within an hour, the message was on the desk of Earth's communication director, a calm woman named Director Hale, who had been waiting for exactly this. She read the message, then she set it aside and picked up the next one, because the crawl message was not the only one. There were 19 messages waiting. 19. From civilizations across the galaxy. From species that had never once sent a polite word to Earth in 200 years. They were all saying different things in different ways. But they were all saying the same thing underneath. "Please." Director Hale read all 19 messages carefully. She made notes. She organized them by which civilizations had sent them, by the tone of each message, by what they were offering, and what they were asking for. Then she picked up her comm and called Commander Wren on Orion 7. "They're reaching out," she said. How many? Ren asked. 19 so far, more coming in every hour. There was a pause on the line. The Veth? Ren asked. Not yet. Another pause. They will, Ren said. Give them 2 more days, they are proud. It will take them longer to accept what they need to do. Hale looked at her screen, at the growing list of incoming messages. What do you want me to tell them? Ren's voice was steady. Tell them Earth has received their messages. Tell them Earth is considering its response. Tell them to wait. Hale almost smiled. Just wait? Just wait, Ren said. Let them sit with it a little longer. On Throne Station, Sovereign Dreth had not eaten in 2 days. His staff were worried. They brought food. He ignored it. They suggested rest. He dismissed them. He stood or sat in the operations room and stared at the screens and thought. He had now read everything his analysts could find about Earth's history. 200 years of human activity in space, carefully reviewed. Everything that had been marked as unimportant, as routine, as not worth serious attention, was now laid out in front of him, and he could see it. Now that he was looking properly, now that he was not filtering everything through the assumption that humans were primitive and uninteresting, he could see the shape of what they had built. The survey missions that weren't really survey missions, the exploration routes that followed patterns too precise to be accidental, the quiet, boring, unremarkable human ships that had traveled the same empty corridors of space for 100 years, placing their invisible nodes one by one. It was, Dreth admitted to himself in the silence of his own mind, extraordinary, not the technology. The technology was impressive, but that was not what struck him most. What struck him was the patience. In 9,000 years of Veth history, Dreth could not think of a single example of his own people doing something like this, building something for 150 years without telling anyone, without showing anyone, without seeking recognition or credit or acknowledgement. The Veth celebrated their achievements. They announced them. They recorded them in great historical documents. They built monuments. Humans had built the most significant strategic project in galactic history and told absolutely nobody. Dreth sat back in his chair. He thought about the council meetings, about the hundreds of times human ambassadors had sat at the far end of the table at the door and been ignored. He thought about sovereign after sovereign before him, who had looked at Earth and seen nothing worth paying attention to. He thought about what Mara Solis must have felt 200 years ago, when the Veth's first message to humans had been a list of things they were not allowed to do. He closed his eyes. Then he opened them and called his senior diplomat into the room. Draft a message to Earth, he said. The diplomat looked surprised. What should it say, Sovereign? Dreth was quiet for a moment. Start with an apology, he said. The diplomat stared at him. In 9,000 years of Veth history, they had never sent an apology to anyone. Sovereign. Start with an apology, Dreth repeated quietly and very firmly. A real one, not a political statement, not a diplomatic softening, a real apology for 200 years of deliberate disrespect. Draft it honestly and bring it to me. The diplomat left the room looking like the floor had moved under him. Dreth looked at his screens again, at the silent galaxy, at the dark zones where his civilization's voice used to reach. We earned this, he said to no one. Ambassador Yara received the news on a transport ship halfway between Throne Station and Earth. She had been traveling since the silence began, heading home, not because she was told to, but because she understood, better than most, what was coming next, and she wanted to be there for it. Her assistant Cole was sitting across from her in the small cabin. He had been quiet for most of the journey, which was unusual for him. He was a young man who normally had many questions and opinions, but the past 5 days had given him a lot to think about. Ambassador, he said finally, breaking the long quiet. Yara looked up from her reading. At the council meeting, he said, before all this happened, when Sovereign Dreth called us a lower civilization, you didn't react, you just nodded and said thank you. Yes. Did you know then? Did you know what was coming? Yara considered the question carefully. I knew something was being prepared, she said. I didn't know the details, very few people did, but I had been an ambassador for 20 years, and I had read the old files, the ones going back to Mara Solis. I knew that Earth had a plan, and I knew that the plan required patience. Cole looked at his hands. So when Dreth called us lower, you weren't angry? I was angry, Yara said simply. I am always angry when I sit at that table. But anger is only useful if you do something intelligent with it. Mara Solis was angry too. She went home and built something instead of shouting. Cole nodded slowly. When we get back to Earth, he said. What happens? Yara looked out the small window of the transport, at the stars passing slowly by. The galaxy comes to our table, she said. And for once, we decide who sits where. Earth's response to the 19 messages went out 4 days after the silence began. It was simple. It said, Earth acknowledges all incoming communications. Earth will receive 1 representative from each affected civilization at the New Geneva Conference Center in 30 days. Travel assistance will be provided for those who require it. Earth looks forward to productive conversation. That was all. No demands yet. No conditions. No list of things they were or were not allowed to do. Just an invitation. On 100 planets in 100 silent rooms, that message was read and reread and discussed by leaders who were not used to being on this side of a conversation. The Veth's message to Earth arrived 8 days after the silence began, 6 days after Dreth had ordered his diplomat to write an apology. It had taken that long because the diplomat had written and rewritten the apology 14 times. Each version had been too formal or too vague or too political or too short. The final version was none of those things. It was 4 paragraphs long. The first paragraph named specific incidents, specific moments over 200 years when the Veth had treated Earth with deliberate disrespect. It named dates and meetings and exact words that had been said. The second paragraph said that those actions were wrong, not that they were misunderstandings, not that they were products of a different time, not that they were complicated by political realities, simply that they were wrong. The third paragraph asked for the chance to do better. The fourth paragraph was 1 sentence. It said, We did not know you were listening. We should have assumed you were. Director Hale read the Veth apology 3 times. Then she sent a copy to Commander Wren. Then she sat alone in her office for a few minutes and allowed herself, very quietly, to feel the weight of what was happening. 200 years, she thought. 200 years of patience. And it came to this. Then she straightened her back and got back to work. On Orion 7, something unexpected happened on the 9th day. A small ship appeared at the edge of the station's scanner range. It was not a human ship. It was Dranasi, old model, lightly powered, the kind of ship used for single-person research trips. It sent a request to dock. Wren looked at the request for a long moment, then approved it. The Dranasi who came through the airlock was not what any of them expected. He was small, younger than most Dranasi that humans had dealt with. He was carrying a data pad in both hands, and he looked exhausted, like he had been traveling for a long time without proper sleep. His name, he told them, was Fen. Wren had him brought to his office. Fen sat down and put his data pad on the desk. I filed reports, he said without introduction, without small talk. 6 months ago I found the pattern in your ship movements. I figured out that something was being built. I filed 2 reports and requested 3 meetings. Nobody listened to me. Wren looked at him calmly. I know. Fen blinked. You know? We monitored all Dranasi internal communications that mentioned human activity, Wren said. We saw your reports. We tracked your meeting requests. We were watching to see if anyone would take you seriously. Fen stared at him. And if they had? If someone had listened to me? Then the plan would have moved to its next phase earlier, Wren said. We had contingencies. Fen was quiet for a moment. He looked at the data pad in front of him, then back at Wren. I came here, he said slowly, because I want you to understand something. I am not here as a Dranasi representative. I am not authorized by anyone. I came on my own, in my own ship, because I think someone needs to say this to a human directly. Wren waited. Fen took a breath. What your people built is remarkable, he said. The patience, the planning, the execution. I have studied alien civilizations my entire career, and I have never seen anything like it. But I am also here because I am afraid. Of what? Wren asked. Of what comes next. Fen said. You have power now, real power. the kind no single civilization has held in a very long time. And I have read enough history to know what usually happens when a civilization gets that kind of power suddenly. He looked at Ren directly. "What are you going to do with it?" he asked. "That is what everyone in the galaxy is afraid to ask you directly, so I am asking." The room was very quiet. Ren looked at the small Dranasi scientist sitting across from him, holding a datapad full of reports that nobody had bothered to read. A person who had tried to do the right thing and been ignored. He felt unexpectedly, something like respect. "I'm going to answer that question," Ren said, "in 30 days in New Geneva, in front of every civilization that comes to that table." Fen nodded slowly. "Will I be allowed to attend?" he asked. Ren almost smiled. "You can sit wherever you like." The New Geneva Conference Center had been built 15 years ago. It was a large, clean building on a hillside outside the city, with windows that looked out over a valley and mountains beyond. It had been used for trade meetings and scientific summits and the occasional diplomatic gathering. It had never hosted anything like this. In the week before the conference, ships began arriving at Earth's orbital stations. More ships than Earth's traffic systems had ever handled at once. The docking coordinators worked around the clock. Earth's welcome teams met every delegation personally, something that no other civilization in the galaxy had ever done for human arrivals. The aliens who came to Earth for the first time saw a planet they had categorized as primitive. What they found surprised them. Earth was not the struggling, underdeveloped world they had expected from their old data files. In the 200 years since first contact, while everyone was busy ignoring humanity, humans had built, quietly and continuously. They had cities that ran on clean energy. They had medical technology that was, in some areas, ahead of civilizations twice their age. They had art and music and food and architecture that was unlike anything else in the galaxy, because it had developed completely independently, without influence from anyone else. The Crowell ambassador, a sharp-eyed trader named Bren, walked through a market in New Geneva on the day before the conference and stopped at a food stall. The human running the stall smiled and offered him something to try. Bren ate it carefully, then looked genuinely surprised. "What is this?" "Mango," the human said. "You want more?" Bren bought 3 portions and ate them while walking. He thought about 60 years of unfair trade contracts and felt, for the first time, that he might have been missing more than he realized. The conference began on a Tuesday morning. The room was large and the table was round. Ambassador Yara had personally overseen the design of the room. The table was round because there was no head, no place of power, no seat that was better than another. Every chair was identical. Every place at the table had the same view of the center. It was such a simple thing. Several of the alien delegates noticed it immediately and said nothing. Commander Ren was not at the table. He was watching from a separate room through a screen. He had been asked to attend, but had said no. This was not his moment. This was Yara's. She had sat at the far end of tables for 20 years. It was right that she should sit at the center of this one. Yara opened the conference with no speech. She simply looked around the table at the faces of 19 civilizations and said, "Thank you for coming. Let's begin." Sovereign Dreth, who had traveled to Earth personally, which no Veth sovereign had ever done for any meeting, spoke first. He stood. He delivered the apology that his diplomat had written and rewritten 14 times. He delivered it without reading from a screen. He had memorized it. The room was completely silent while he spoke. When he finished, he sat down. Yara looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you, Sovereign. We accept." 2 words, clean and final. Then she looked around the table and said, "Now, the 7 words." Every delegate leaned forward slightly. The 7 words had been discussed and speculated about for 10 days across every civilization that could still communicate. Theories had been proposed and rejected. Some thought it was a threat. Some thought it was a declaration of war. Some thought it was a code for something larger. Yara put them on the screen at the center of the table. 7 words. Every delegate read them. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then the young Solvan delegate, a person who had never attended a galactic conference before and had been sent because everyone more senior was too frightened to come, said quietly. That's all? That's all, Yara said. The 7 words on the screen were simple. They said, "We remember everything, do you?" The young Solvan delegate sat back in their chair. They thought about every history lesson they had ever received about Earth, every dismissive sentence, every time a teacher had moved quickly past the human section because there was nothing important to cover. They thought about what it meant that a civilization had been quietly watching and remembering for 200 years, and they understood, finally, completely, what kind of people they were now sitting across from. Not angry people, not vengeful people, patient people, the most patient people in the galaxy, and that, the young delegate realized, was far more powerful than any weapon. Yara looked around the round table one more time. "Earth is not here to punish anyone," she said. "Earth is not here to take anything. Earth is here to establish one simple thing." She paused. "From today, every civilization at this table treats every other civilization at this table as an equal. No more lower civilizations, no more primitive labels, no more unfair contracts or unauthorized studies or disrespectful assignments at the end of the table." She folded her hands. "In return, the silence ends. We release your communications. We restore your signals. We return everything to normal." She looked at Dreth, then around the full circle. "But," she said, and her voice was very quiet and very clear, "if any civilization at this table returns to its old behavior, the silence returns, permanently, with no conference, no negotiation, no second chance." The room was still. "Do we have an agreement?" Yara asked. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Sovereign Dreth, oldest diplomat in the room, representing the oldest civilization in the galaxy, put his hand flat on the table. "Agreed," he said one by one, around the round table. Every delegate did the same. In a room down the corridor, watching through a screen, Commander Wren sat back in his chair. Private Danny was standing beside him, watching the same screen. She had asked to come, and he had said yes. She watched the hands go down around the table, one after another, and felt something she did not have a word for yet, something large and quiet and permanent. "Is it over?" she asked. Wren thought about it. "The waiting is over," he said. "Now the real work starts." Danny nodded. She looked at the screen, at the round table, at the equal chairs, at Yara sitting calmly at the center of something that had taken 200 years to build. "Commander," she said. "Yes." "Those 7 words," she said. "We remember everything. Do you think they really understood? All those civilizations?" Wren watched the screen. "They do now," he said. The conference ended on a Wednesday evening. The delegates left the round table slowly. Some of them stood outside the building for a while, looking at the Earth sky, at the clouds and the blue color that was different from the skies of their own worlds. Some of them talked quietly to each other in small groups. Things that were not said inside the room were being said now, in lower voices, in the open air of a planet they had underestimated. Sovereign Dreth stood alone near the entrance of the building. He was looking at the mountains in the distance. Ambassador Yara walked out and stood beside him. They did not speak for a moment. Then Dreth said, without looking at her, "How long have you known about the project?" Yara looked at the mountains. 20 years. I knew something was being built. I didn't know exactly what until 10 days ago." "And you sat at that table," Dreth said. "All those years, every meeting, every time we ignored you, every time we put you at the far end of the room, you knew." "Yes." Dreth was quiet for a long time. "That must have been very difficult," he said finally. Yara considered this. "It was necessary," she said. "Difficult things usually are." Dreth nodded slowly. He looked at the sky, at the unfamiliar clouds of an unfamiliar world. "In 9,000 years," he said, "my civilization has never apologized to anyone, not once, not in any record I have ever read." Yara said nothing. "It felt," Dreth said, then stopped. He started again. It felt correct. That surprised me. I expected it to feel like defeat. It did not feel like defeat. Yara looked at him. Because it wasn't defeat. It was the first honest thing the Veth have done in a very long time. Dreth looked at her. His very old eyes were calm. You are a remarkable diplomat, Ambassador. Yara smiled, just slightly. I had a good teacher. She died 60 years before I was born. But she left very good notes. Dreth understood who she meant. He looked at the mountains one more time. Then he went back inside to begin the process of going home. 2 days after the conference, Earth began releasing the silence. It did not happen all at once. Director Hale had designed the release process carefully, deliberately. The signals were restored one civilization at a time, starting with the smaller ones, the ones that had been caught in the silence not because of their own actions but because they were connected to larger silence networks. For each restoration, Earth sent a personal message to the civilization being reconnected. The message was the same for all of them. It said, "Your communications are restored. Earth looks forward to a new relationship built on mutual respect. We remember the past. We choose the future." Each message was signed personally by Ambassador Yara. The Crowl were restored on the 3rd day. Their signals came back online in the middle of the night, and the reaction across their communication networks was immediate. Ships that had been drifting without instruction suddenly received new coordinates. Traders who had been sitting on undelivered cargo got their orders. Station managers who had been making solo decisions for 10 days finally heard from their headquarters. The relief was enormous. Bren, the Crowl ambassador who had eaten mango in the New Geneva market, was standing in his ship's communication room when the signal came back. He heard his home station's voice for the first time in 10 days. He sat down in a chair and breathed out very slowly. Then he called his council and began the process of reviewing every trade contract that Crowl had with human businesses, every unfair deal, every inflated fee, every contract that had taken advantage of human desperation for trading rights. He had a long list. It would take months to fix all of them. He was prepared to take that time. The Veth were restored last. Dreth was back on Throne Station when it happened. He was standing in the operations room, the same room where he had spent 10 days watching his civilization's voice disappear into silence. The screens around him went from dark to bright all at once, signal after signal, coming back online. His homeworld, his colonies, his fleets, all of them reconnecting, all of them sending the same panicked and relieved and confused messages at the same time. His senior communications officer turned from her station with wide eyes. "We're back," she said. Dreth nodded. He looked at the screens, at the returning signals, at the galaxy slowly lighting up again. "Record this date," he said quietly, "in the official Veth historical record. Record it as the day the Veth civilization learned the most important lesson in 9,000 years. His officer looked at him, waiting. "Record it as the day," Dreth said. "We discovered that being the oldest is not the same as being the wisest. On Orion 7, Commander Wren received a direct call from Earth Command on the 14th day after the conference. The call was not from Director Hale. It was from someone Wren had not spoken to in several years, an old general named Marsh, who had been one of the original architects of Project Silence, one of the 12 people who had kept the full secret for decades. Marsh was very old now. His hair was completely white, and his face had the kind of lines that came from carrying heavy things for a long time. He looked at Wren through the screen and said, "Good work, Commander." Wren shook his head slightly. "I didn't do much. I read a file and watched." "That's more than most people manage," Marsh said. "Watching carefully is a skill. Don't undervalue it." There was a pause. "There's one more thing," Marsh said. "Something that wasn't in your file. Something that only a small number of people know about." Wren waited. "The civilizations that were silenced," Marsh said. "They think their communications were simply blocked. They think Project Silence is a signal jamming technology." "It's not," Wren said. "It is," Marsh said. "Partially. But there is a second component, one that was never made public, not even to the affected civilizations." He leaned forward slightly. "When the silence activated, it didn't just block signals. For the 12 most aggressive civilizations, the ones with the longest history of direct harm toward Earth, it did something else as well. It copied every communication those civilizations sent in the 72 hours before the silence. Every message, every internal document, every military order, everything. Ren was very still. "We have records," Marsh said. "Complete records of every decision those civilizations made, every plan they had, every agreement between them that humans were never supposed to know about. We have it all." Ren looked at the old general on his screen. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. Marsh sat back. "Because you're being assigned to a new post," he said. "Earth is building something new. A permanent galactic oversight office. A place where human representatives will sit, not at the end of a table, not in an observer's chair, but as full partners in galactic governance. Someone needs to lead it." Ren was quiet. "The records," Marsh continued, "are insurance. We will never use them unless someone breaks the agreement made at New Geneva. If that happens, we release them. All of them. Every secret, every private plan, every agreement made behind closed doors." Ren nodded slowly. A second silence. "A different kind," Marsh said. "Not a silence of communication, a silence of secrets. Every hidden thing made public." Ren thought about this for a long moment. "That's why they'll keep the agreement," he said. "Not just because of what we showed them we could do, but because they don't know everything we have." "Correct," Marsh said. "The first project took 150 years to build. This one will take longer." But Mara Solis always said the same thing about long projects. "What did she say?" Ren asked. Marsh smiled, the first time Ren had seen him smile in years. She said, "Start today." Private Danny was packing her things. She had received her new assignment that morning. She was being transferred to Earth, to a training program for the new Galactic Oversight Office that Commander Ren had told her about. She would be one of the youngest people in the program. She was not sure she was ready. She was rolling her spare uniform when Ren knocked on the open door of her quarters. She looked up. "Commander." He leaned against the doorframe. "How are you feeling about the transfer?" Danny considered lying and saying she was fine. She decided against it. "Nervous," she said honestly. "I've been on this station for 2 months. I've barely done anything. I don't understand why they want me in that program." Ren looked at her for a moment. "Do you remember," he said, "the morning after the silence started, when you knocked on my door and asked if I was okay?" "Yes. You were the only person on this station who did that," he said. 12 people here, all of them looking at the screens, reading the reports, thinking about the galaxy. You were the only one who thought to check on the person in the room." Danny looked at him. "That is not a small thing," Ren said. "The new office is going to need people who understand information and politics and galactic history. It is going to have many of those people. What it also needs, what it always needs, are people who remember that behind all the information and politics and history, there are actual people." He pushed off from the doorframe. "You remembered that at 17, he said. "That's why they want you." Danny looked down at the uniform in her hands. She finished rolling it and put it in her bag. "Will you be at the new office?" she asked. "I'll be running it," he said. She looked up, surprised. He nodded once, then turned to leave. "Commander," she said. He stopped. "What happens to the ones who were frozen?" she asked. "The ones Project Silence put into communication blackout? The leaders, the military heads, the ones who made the worst decisions against Earth? What happens to them?" Ren turned back. This was the question he had been thinking about for 2 weeks. The answer was delivered by Ambassador Yara in a separate, smaller meeting held in New Geneva 1 week after the main conference. This meeting had no public record, no broadcast, no official transcript. It had 8 people in the room, 4 from Earth, and 4 representatives chosen by the affected civilizations to hear what Earth had decided. Yara sat at a small table, not round this time, just a plain table in a plain room, with windows looking out at the same valley and mountains. She said, "Earth has made a decision about the individuals most directly responsible for actions against human people and human interests over the past 200 years. The four representatives were very still. "We are not going to pursue them," Yara said. "Silence. We are not going to demand their removal from power. We are not going to publish what we know about their decisions. We are not going to take any action against them as individuals." One of the representatives, a Crowl elder named Sos, leaned forward slowly. "Why?" Yara looked at him. "Because Marasolis wrote something in her original project documents," she said. She wrote, "The goal is not revenge, the goal is change. If you spend your energy punishing the past, you have no energy left to build the future." She folded her hands on the table. "Earth wants a future," she said simply. "That is worth more to us than settling old scores." The Kral elder Sos sat back. He looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked up at Yara. "My people," he said slowly, "have a saying. When someone shows you more grace than you deserve, you owe them more than gratitude." "What do you owe them?" Yara asked. "You owe them the decision to be worthy of it," he said. Yara nodded. "Then we understand each other," she said. 6 months after the conference, the Galactic Oversight Office opened in New Geneva. It was not a large building, not impressive from the outside. It looked like any other office building in the city. Plain walls, clean windows, a small sign by the door. But inside, on any given day, there were representatives from 32 civilizations working in the same rooms, sharing the same tables, using the same coffee machines, eating lunch in the same cafeteria. The Dranasi scientist Fen had been given a permanent research position there. He spent his days analyzing patterns in galactic communication data, which was exactly what he had always wanted to do. He was very good at it. Nobody ignored his reports anymore. The young Solvan delegate who had sat at the conference table and said, "That's all?" when the 7 words were revealed, became the Solvan's permanent representative at the office. She turned out to be very good at the work, direct and fair, and unusually good at finding solutions that worked for everyone. Dreth visited twice in the first year. He did not come as a sovereign making an inspection. He came as a student. He sat in meetings and listened more than he spoke. His staff found this confusing. It was, they agreed privately, a new Dreth, different from the one who had stood at the head of council tables for decades. Better, most of them thought, though none of them said it out loud. Commander Wren sat in his office in New Geneva on a morning in early spring. He had a window, a real window, looking at the valley. The mountains were still white at the tops. The sky was the particular blue that Earth skies had in the morning before the day got too warm. He had a cup of coffee, hot this time. On his desk was a stack of reports, signal monitoring summaries, trade agreement reviews, a draft of new guidelines for how galactic exploration missions should operate. A request from a small young civilization on the edge of explored space who had just made contact and wanted to know if anyone was friendly. He had written yes on that last one already and sent it back. Along with an invitation, there was a knock at his door. "Come in," he said. Danny opened the door. She was in a new uniform now, the dark blue of the oversight office. She was still small, still had short dark hair and careful eyes. But something had settled in her expression over the past 6 months, a steadiness that had not been there before. "Morning briefing in 10 minutes, she said. "I know," Wren said. She started to leave. "Danny?" She turned back. Wren looked at her for a moment, then out the window at the mountains. "Do you know what Marasolis said in the last entry of her personal log?" he asked. "The one she wrote the day before she died?" Danny shook her head. Wren looked back at her. She said, "I will not see the end of this. Nobody who starts a long thing ever sees the end of it. But I have seen the beginning, and the beginning is enough." Danny was quiet. She started something in a small ship with 5 people and a list of things she wasn't allowed to do, Wren said. And 153 years later it became this. He gestured. Not at the office, not at the building, but at the window, at the sky, at everything beyond it. Danny looked at the mountains for a moment. Then she said, "Do you think she'd be happy with how it turned out?" Wren thought about it seriously. the way he thought about everything. "I think," he said slowly, "she would be happy that nobody died. I think she would be pleased that the round table worked. I think she would like that the smallest delegate in the room turned out to be one of the best ones." He picked up his coffee. "And I think," he said, "she would immediately start worrying about the next problem, because that's what people like her do. They finish one long thing and start another." Danny smiled. It was a real smile, not polite, not professional, just real. "10 minutes, she said. "I'll be there," Ren said. She left, and he heard her footsteps going down the corridor, steady and unhurried. He turned back to his window. The valley was bright in the morning light, green and wide and full of ordinary life. People walking, a market opening up at the far end, a child running for some reason known only to children. Above it all, the sky was clear, and somewhere up there, past the blue and past the clouds and past the orbit where Orion 7 still turned slowly with its scratched window, the galaxy was doing something it had not done in a very long time. It was listening, not because it was afraid, not because it had no choice, but because it had finally learned that the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones sitting at the far end of the table, the ones nobody bothered to watch, were almost always the most interesting ones in the room. And on a small planet that the galaxy had once dismissed as primitive and unimportant, the work continued, quietly, carefully, without telling anyone what came next, because that in the end was what humans did best.